Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Tuesday, April 14th, coming off a Toronto Blue Jays off day, which followed yet another series loss, this time to the Minnesota Twins. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, how was your off day, and are you ready to go for a series in Milwaukee?
Yeah, things have been ungood in Blue Jays land, to say the least. So an off day is certainly a welcome distraction. And not the April that the Blue Jays surely envisioned. Another series lost. The record keeps slipping. And it's early. It's easy to say it's early. But again, they're going to have to get this ship righted at some point. And it's not like the Brewers are going to make life any easier.
Yeah, I don't want to, dwell on this Twin series for so long because there have been a couple days since obviously they lose the series finale, but some tough starting pitching throughout, rough outings for Patrick Corbin and Eric Lauer and Max Scherzer, each of them, giving up their fair share of homers, giving up some runs. Kind of sitting here waiting for Trey Savage to ultimately be back. But even then, I kind of wonder what Trey Savage's leash is going to be early on in this season, right? As he comes back from injury, and we already knew that they were going to manage his workload carefully. So will be kind of interesting to see how things unfold. I think Savage is going to make another minor league start here at some point this week, and then kind of sounds like he might be able to make his way back. But until then, you're still working with the group of Dylan Cease, Kevin Gausman, and the group of Lauer, Corbin, and Scherzer, who have kind of been unreliable to start the year. So I kind of wonder for you, I mean, what, like, as we sit here waiting for you, Savage, and then even beyond that, what is kind of your assessment of this rotation in its current state?
I mean, there is no assessment to make. It's white knuckle time, and pray for a healthy Savage and ideally a healthy Bieber soon, because this is a Blue Jays rotation that really is right now Gosman, Cease, and their band of merry men. I mean, I do have better hope, so to speak, for Max Scherzer to come, although this is now two straight starts of extremely uneven performance. And then beyond that, I'm not sure what you can really expect from Eric Lauer and certainly from Patrick Corbin. It's going to be a case where the Jays are going to have to get the offense going, because that's also continued to be an issue. We saw it again against the Twins. And it just becomes this snowball effect where the pitching now is a problem, but the hitting still hasn't fixed itself. Well, then clearly you're not going to be winning ball games.
Yeah, so as we sit here on Tuesday, the scheduled rotation for the week ahead is Gausman, Cease, and Corbin in Milwaukee here, and then Lauer and Scherzer kind of open the series in Arizona, and then of course you go Gausman and Cease once again. So you kind of figure the Trey Savage season debut would kind of line up to fit in that a week from today against the Angels. So it's one of those things that they've obviously had to deal with, and it's been kind of a dagger for them to have so many of their guys out. When entering their year, you figured that you had the starting pitching depth, and then even to have Lauer struggle here. Obviously, he had the flu in his start against the White Sox, and then against the Twins, the other day he gives up 7 in 1 inning and pitches five scoreless otherwise. So, hopefully he's able to kind of lean on whatever made him successful in those scoreless innings coming up against the Diamondbacks here. And then Scherzer, I mean, we saw him only make it through 2 against the Dodgers after dealing with some forearm tendonitis and then saying that he was okay. And then, the Twins kind of just blitzed him really in that start. So I think, as much as the concern is that they don't have the depth to fill in kind of for that last spot, like the performance of Lauer and Scherzer is almost like more important because even if Savage comes back and pitches well in the Patrick Corbin rotation spot, like that doesn't solve them having, struggles in the other two.
Yeah, it's just a matter of you don't have the depth, because think of how deep they've had to go to this point to
Yeah.
try to get guys to fill in those rotation spots, right? It's a bit of a no-win situation. And I guess I would also kind of ask you, is concern level for Scherzer, is he even going to make it through the season at this point? Because right now it kind of feels like he might be on washed watch.
Well, the first start of the year was certainly good for him against the Rockies, but also, that's against the Rockies. And then the one against the Dodgers, I don't really know how much you can evaluate that because he I guess, felt the forearm tendonitis before the game, and then said he was going to give them 2 innings of work, and then, this one against the Twins, I mean, you just get rocked. Basically, is kind of the case. So, I don't want to put him on washed watch at this point when ultimately, he's had one good start, one bad start, and one start that I don't think you can really factor into his season results all that much. But if he comes out against the Diamondbacks and struggles again, and then if he starts kind of racking up poor starts, then you have to consider your alternatives, which when this team desperately needs some stability in the rotation, having to consider your alternatives, that at this point
I
are
mean, these
guys in
are the
triple.
alternatives.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you're the alternative to the alternative. And, if he struggles through his next couple, then that's when you're going to be concerned and you're going to be kind of looking more at the, hey, Jose Barrios, what's up with your timeline, pal? Because we need you up here ASAP.
Yeah, it's just frustrating is the one word I would use. Perplexing is one word I would use. There's a lot of expletives I think I might use. This has been an immensely frustrating first few weeks of the Blue Jays season because we know that they can and should be better than this.
Yeah.
It's just the injury bug has just ravaged them.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, we sit here, they're 6-9, they're 2.5 games back of the Yankees. It's kind of funny the way that the season has unfolded in the American League, right? Like the teams in last place all have 6 wins, and only two teams have more than 10 wins. So everybody's kind of in this mushy middle, but it's all 15 teams in the league, and then in the NL, a similar story is unfolding. Like when is there going to be kind of some separation? I mean, if you're the Blue Jays, you're obviously hoping that there isn't going to be until you are back at full strength and ready to attack things with your full roster. But it's been good for them, I suppose, that there's kind of been this parity to start the year.
Yeah, I mean, it helps, but it's also April 14th. Who's to say this is going to last
Yeah.
through May and beyond? They obviously got to get healthy because that's how they're going to win ball games, but B, they've got to right the ship.
So I mean, as obviously we're here and looking at this team with I think it's 10 guys on the injured list, like 10 guys that you figured were going to be important members of this 2026 Blue Jays team. And I guess we can go to the Springer injury here because of course, he suffers a fractured great left toe, I believe was the official wording from the Blue Jays on that one. And it seems like something that isn't going to keep him out from that for that long. I think I kind of was looking around trying to figure out what a timeline may be for him, and was looking at guys like Ozzy Albies who had suffered similar injuries. I think Francisco Lindor played through a broken toe recently, and so it's not something that is going to keep Springer out for the long term. But in the meantime, where he's on the 10-day IL and they have to call up Eloy Jiménez and kind of have to fill in that leadoff spot, like it's just another blow to this team where you're down Barger, you're down Kirk, you're down all these pitchers, and can you afford to lose a guy like Springer? I know he hadn't been swinging it particularly well, but having his presence there in the leadoff spot, and as well, that if you're going to want him to get back to the form that we saw last year, or 80% or 70% of that, like he kind of needs the at bats to find his way there, right? So it's all this mess basically as they kind of battle through the IL. But I guess kind of with the Springer thing, I mean, what do you kind of make of him going down and what that kind of means for this lineup here in the next week or so?
I mean, what to make of it is they're missing a key cog. And outside of that, you got to hope that he gets healthy quickly and that this doesn't disrupt any potential, I mean, improvements, shall we say, excuse me, from what we'd seen to start the season. And we did see an extra base hit the day before he got hurt. So perhaps that was a sign of life. But as soon as he hits the IL, it just kind of sets everything back for him. And again, I think that there was this belief. I mean, it just, with myself and kind of what we'd heard internally uh, around the Blue Jays, like they have this guy as a guy that they feel is going to be a contributor for the team this year. Like there's no reason to believe that they aren't going to get the best version of him. But I mean, he has to be healthy in order to provide that. And if he's going to be hurt and be playing, shorthanded, so to speak, or short-footed, if you will, I mean, even if he's playing through it, it's going to affect his production.
Yeah, I think the thing that maybe helps him get back sooner is that he's a DH, right? Like you don't need to you don't need to have him running up there in the outfield and trying to track down fly balls on a broken foot or a broken toe. But so the move brings up Eloy Jiménez, who obviously had a strong spring training and had I guess we can call it an uneven start to the year in Buffalo. I think that the numbers were okay. It was a 257 average, 372 OBP, one homer, 112 WRC plus, and he comes up and picks up two singles in his Blue Jays debut. What are kind of your expectations for him as a guy who comes up with obviously this long track record, or not? I wouldn't call it a long track record, but he has a history of
Pedigree.
he has a
I,
history of performing at the major league level.
I don't know, man. I've been asked this question a couple times. I mean, I was on the radio the other day and they asked me the same thing, and I don't really know how to answer it because, your expectations for him 2019 was 7 years ago now. I mean,
Don't remind me.
this is not the Eloy Jimenez that was among the best prospects in Major League Baseball. This isn't even, a young Eloy Jimenez. He's 29, turns 30 just after this year's World Series. Uh, I mean, my expectations are something along the lines of, that he can pound the ball with some authority. He has that pop. He's shown that pop, but he's demonstrated limited ability to turn that power into anything resembling productivity. So I struggled to place any expectations on him beyond that I would have of any other guy that's kind of been a AAA journeyman that is getting a shot at the big leagues because of a multitude of injuries. And it's easy to have higher hopes for him because he showed some stuff in spring, because he has the prospect pedigree. But I really feel like I have a tough time having high expectations for him in anything resembling a productive hitter because he hasn't been that in forever.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like there is this semblance of this guy who can hit the ball hard. Obviously, we saw it. He hit a couple singles in that game. The bat speed looks okay, but then on the other side, he struck out in his other two at bats and kind of went fishing for a couple pitches out of the zone. So what is he going to be? I think you kind of look at his AAA results, and there was a guy who was hitting the ball into the ground quite often, and a guy who wasn't lifting the ball and just kind of wasn't swinging and missing, and it was like a fine profile, but like even when you compared it to some of the other guys who were down there in AAA, it's not like he was head and shoulders above of like a Johendrick Pinongo or an RJ Schreck, right? I know Schreck has kind of had a slow start to the season results wise, but he's not chasing, he's getting on base, he's hitting the ball hard, also hitting the ball on the ground seems to be a common issue down there in Buffalo to start the year, but. Um, we'll kind of see how it turns out with Eloy. I think that's a guy that you just kind of got to put in the lineup and see what he can bring. I don't know if they're going to be, planning on platooning there at all or kind of what the expectation is from them internally for him. But I think that's a guy that you just put into the lineup and, hopefully he's able to give you a big swing or two while he's up here and maybe, try and impress and stick around when Springer comes back.
If you were to give me like a rough OPS number that you would be content with getting at Eloy Jimenez, does that number start with, I mean, does it start with an 8? Does it start with a 7?
I think you'd be head over heels if he had a 800 OPS or higher in his time here with the Jays. I think realistically looking at what he has brought to throughout his career, whatever. Like, I mean, he had a 744 OPS in Buffalo before being called up. Like, to me, if he's able to replicate that, that would probably be a win. Maybe he gets there a little bit differently. Maybe it's not as walk driven as it was in AAA. But if he's able to, I think it's just that, right? It's just given some power, hit. Given an extra base here, an extra base hit here and there, and that would kind of be the ideal version of him kind of down in the order where they just kind of desperately need somebody to kind of spring for extra bases, spring for a homer or two, and give them that pop.
Yeah, because I mean, he could in theory give them that, but again, you point to the two strikeouts, and I mean, there's your big glaring. That's why he got a minor league deal. He's just has not produced, hasn't stayed healthy as a big leaguer in recent years.
Yeah, he's I mean like kind of I sent you this table that I made up when Springer went down, and I was like, who's going to be the guy that you want called up? And you said, do I have to pick somebody because the guys in Buffalo have all had various levels of performance. And I think you look at Eloy and he had like a 284 ex WOBA in AAA and a 354 WOBA. Pinyongo was also a 284 ex WOBA, a 355 WOBA. Shrek was kind of the opposite where he had he's hitting the ball pretty well, but just walking a ton, but it had a 549 OPS. Like, do you think that Eloy was? I think he was the obvious choice because of what he's done in the majors and what he did in spring training. But was he kind of the guy that you would have preferred that they called up, or do you think that it would have been better to go with like a Pinago or somebody else?
I mean, listen, the other thing I think also is don't forget he's got an opt out in his deal, and
Yeah,
you want to see what you got in him. So, to me, I think that definitely plays a role in him being the guy that gets the recall because you have guys comparable enough to him that you've basically developed yourself. That you have a little bit more of a say in how they've been molded. With Jiménez, it's kind of a case of okay, is this guy a productive hitter? Well, I mean, he's been okay at AAA. Well, we may as well give him a shot. And if he doesn't hit, then you DFA him and, thank you for your service. And off he goes, probably to greener pastures elsewhere.
yeah. We'll see. It'll be yeah, I would imagine he's going to be a guy that we're going to see quite a bit of in the next week or so. Another thing that obviously they do in the past week here is they make the trade for Lenyn Sosa with the White Sox trading Jordan Rich and I believe it was future considerations for Sosa, who comes over like kind of weird timing for the trade. I think we're still kind of waiting the corresponding roster move because Sosa's out of minor league options. So it kind of seems, like to me, it just kind of makes sense that Tyler Fitzgerald will be headed down to AAA because he's been on the 26 man for he was on the 26 man for the whole Twin series and he didn't get into a game. So the Sosa thing, I guess he just kind of comes in there and replaces that. He's a guy who can play multiple positions. He hit 22 homers last year with the White Sox. He's a guy who, makes a lot of contact, or I guess not a lot of contact, but he doesn't, he's not a 30% strikeout guy. He's got like a little bit of pop in the bat. What did you kind of make of the trade and, where do you kind of expect him slotting in?
I don't know if I make anything of the trade from necessarily an asset or a production
Did
standpoint.
they win or lose the trade right now?
It's a lost trade. I just knocked my camera out. You can feel the passion through the screen. No, what I wonder is how this affects Nathan Lucas. That's what I
Do
really
you
wonder.
think Lucas is the guy that they would
I mean, not the first guy, but I mean, you're gonna
down the
have
road?
Springer coming back too, and you've still got to add Sosa to the roster. To me, this feels like them looking at the slow start that Nathan Lucas has had and them kind of using it as something of a soft excuse to go, hey, go fix yourself down in AAA, away from the bright lights where we can get you some regular at bats, and we'll give you another go. When in reality, his spot is just kind of a bit of a redundancy at this point. And unfortunately, because of the start that Jesus Sanchez has had, Nathan Lucas, who was a key contributor to a Blue Jays team last year that made it to the World Series, is unfortunately not going to get that same opportunity this year.
That's interesting. So your version of this is Sosa gets put on the roster today, and Fitzgerald goes to AAA, and then when Springer comes back, it's Lucas that goes down and not Jimenez.
I mean, to me, it
Or when Barger
seems like,
comes back, I suppose, because
yeah,
he should get
yeah, it would
close
be
as well.
more like kind of Barger would be in that picture as well,
Yeah,
and then Springer as well in that picture, right? Listen, they have a couple guys coming back in short order, and it feels like because you add Sosa, doesn't have any options left. He's going to be on the big league roster, but he's an infielder. He's not an outfielder. So now you've got, okay, are you going to be working with a catcher and then two infielders, one outfielder? Are you going to work with Barger as primarily a third baseman? Like, again, there's a lot of machinations here that they could kind of turn to. And the thing that I just keep coming to is they have two left-handed hitting outfielders here, and it's just a redundancy, especially when you bring in Sosa, who it would seem kind of plays a bit of that can play a little bit of second and a little bit of third-ish, although I don't even know if he's played third in the big leagues. But it's just the situation where you've got an infielder, albeit not a great defensive one, and it fills a role that you don't have filled otherwise.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm, obviously we're still like a few days away from that happening as we kind of wait for Barger to get back from his ankle injury. I would assume that he doesn't need a rehab stint, depending on, I guess kind of when he officially does get activated. But I think the move's interesting. I think the Fitzgerald stuff where, he doesn't even get a shot is kind of funny. Like if it is indeed him that goes down, right? Like I don't see them.
You would think. I mean, he
I
literally hasn't seen the field.
is there a world where Lucas goes down today? I don't think so.
No, no, there isn't. But I mean, I suspect it's probably Fitzgerald goes, then Jimenez goes, then
Yeah.
probably. I mean, I kind of think Nathan Lucas.
I mean, you look at the results for Lucas, and it's a minus 37 WRC plus to start the year, right? And he's chasing a ton. Like I wonder if they're pressing, right? Like we've seen them chase as a team like so much more this year than they have or than they did in 2025. And I think certainly if you're looking at guys who are like probably feeling the pressure a little bit, it's a Nathan Lucas, it's a Tyler Heineman, guys who are kind of more playing for like their spots going forward, right? So
Yeah, and also they're playing for their big league careers, and they've been pressed into roles that they're not. I mean, especially in the case of Heineman, like we talked about, pressed into roles that they're not expected to fill out to begin the
yeah.
season.
Yeah. Sosa to me, interesting ad enough. I mean, obviously, we said, he hit the 22 homers last year for his career. He's a 101 WRC plus against lefties and a 73 against righties. So like a pretty clear platoon guy that you bring in on the infield. You mentioned kind of how he's played across the infield in his career. He's logged time at first, at second, at third. In 2022, he played some shortstop, so I don't think that he's quite going to be filling in there. But for a guy who kind of fits what this team tries to do, right? Like his in 2025, you look, the whiff rate was kind of around average. He struck out a little bit more than average. He does not walk. He kind of fits in like the Nathan Lucas level of like free swinger as a guy who is not going up there looking to take pitches. Um, where do you think his playing time comes from? Just kind of like filling in. I wonder like if we're talking about Lucas coming out, like Davis Schneider has played well, right? Like you get him a little bit more time in left field, so does that kind of open up some playing time for a guy like Sosa at second base?
It would seem that's probably how things line up, and we'll see how Schneider maintains his production, and we'll see if Lenyn Sosa can produce as an infielder. I mean, defensively, he don't look at the lollipop charts; they're not pretty. But I mean, he is a second baseman by trade, so one would seem to think that's probably where he gets the playing time, and that comes at the expense of David Schneider, whose playing time comes at the expense of Nathan Lucas, and it's all a domino effect. This episode of the Bird's Eye View podcast is brought to you by BioSteel. Use code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order at biosteel.ca. Again, that's code Bird's Eye View at checkout for 20% off your order. For all your high performance hydration needs, visit biosteel.ca. Thank you again to BioSteel for sponsoring today's episode.
I want to bring this full circle now because we're talking a little bit about lineup construction and everything, and obviously Springer's injury leaves a pretty big hole at the top of the lineup, and they've gone, Ernie Clement to kind of fill that spot right away. Do you think that Ernie is kind of the guy that they're going to stick with there? Do you think, Davis Schneider? I would imagine Davis Schneider gets the call against lefties as we saw in the World Series. But like I mean, for you, kind of that leadoff spot, like I don't think that they have like a ready-made replacement for that spot. So kind of how do you manage that while Springer's out?
Yeah, it's by committee. Uh, I kind of joked this to you, I think over text. I wonder what Vladdy in the leadoff spot would look like. I know it'll
Again,
never happen. It never happened.
no.
But we saw Nick Kurtz hitting on the leadoff spot against the Athletics. Obviously, Otani gets tons of leadoff reps. I think Judge gets in there every once in a while. I just wonder what it would be. Obviously, you want guys on base for Vlad, but I wonder if that's something that would be a possibility.
We've talked about this on the show before, but again, if you're putting, the Blue Jays ideal lineup into, you want to use your favorite lineup calculator as to how to build the roster. And Vladimir Guerrero Jr. would not be hitting third. He would be hitting
No,
second, most likely, or maybe even first, because you want him to get the most at bats. But um, he seems to be,
a little set.
comfortable in
Well,
the
for
third
you,
spot. So.
like, do you have a guy that you're eyeing up that maybe we haven't talked about as a leadoff option? I mean, when he's back, could Addison Barger be a guy that you look at? I mean, obviously he's a little swing happy, but if you want some kind of thump in that top of the lineup, if he can get himself righted, he'd certainly kind of fit the bill there. And I mean, there's others too.
Yeah, I think, to me, like you look at it, Schneider's kind of the one that stands out, right? Because he works a long plate appearance. He gets on base, he walks quite a bit. The way that the team's been hitting this year, like they just don't really have like guys who are kind of fitting that mold, right? Like you look at their OBP leaders, you're obviously Eloy Jiménez 1 game, so he's not filling in there. Vladdy, we just talked about, isn't sliding in there. Tyler Heineman, I think would be a pretty stunning choice to put in the leadoff spot. David Schneider's fourth in OBP. Miles Straw, again, like not a guy that you're probably going to hit leadoff. I
Just
actually,
a lack of options.
honestly, I could see them putting Straw into a leadoff spot. He's kind of in the similar like Ernie Clement kind of vein of like free swinging, but at least, Ernie's, um,
It got a smidgen of power.
yeah. Varsho is sixth on the team in OBP this year. He's had such an interesting start to the year where, he was so slow and then he had like kind of this explosion against the Twins. He's got 2 homers now. His strikeout rate has dropped a ton, which is really interesting to see. Jimenez, we have seen him hit leadoff, I believe, for this Blue Jays team before. So could they go there against righties? Just like a lot of guys who you could like kind of like see them turning to, but I don't think that there's like an ideal option to kind of fill what Springer brings at the top yet.
Yeah, it kind of is what it is. They just are unfortunately not flush with leadoff hitters.
Yeah. Um, so I guess kind of, looking at this lineup, I mean, obviously the Twins series where they have that big explosion in game 1, Brandon Valenzuela hits his first career home run, like huge moment for him. And they get the big Varsho game. They get, kind of the offense looks like it wakes up, and then Joe Ryan and Tosh Bradley kind of put them in their pocket for the next 2 games. Where are you at with the offense? Like, how do you kind of expect them going forward without Springer? Still no Barger. I mean, like who are you, is there anybody that you're like super concerned about with the results other than Nathan Lucas, I suppose? Is there anybody that you're encouraged by? Like, kind of where's your head at with this
They
group?
We talked about it before we hit the record button. They desperately need Kaz Okamoto to figure it out because this guy had a real nice opening series and has since looked thoroughly outmatched, I think would be a nice way to put it. Um, Varsho picking it up is important. They need him to be a contributor. They need Vlad to continue raking. He's picked it up a little bit here. I, I mean, there's just so many guys that they need to contribute here because they're hurting so bad that it's, not only is it by committee, but it's like beyond by committee because the committee's already hurt. So who else is gonna be showing up to do damage? They're in such a pickle here. There's really like, listen, it's early, but the optimism for this being one of the best offenses in baseball has certainly wavered a healthy bit.
Yeah, the Okamoto stuff, like, do I think he's going to figure it out? Yes, because this is a guy who has like this track record of being a guy who hits for power, a guy who doesn't strike out a ton, right? And a guy who pulls the ball in the air. And we haven't really seen him pull the ball in the air all that often in his time with the Blue Jays, but you kind of look at his swing and miss, right? And like pitchers have adjusted to him after his hot start. Like he's getting pounded low and away, he's getting pounded away. You look at his whiff rate on pitches low and away, 75%. And that's outside the zone. So obviously, you're probably going to swing and miss at those. But his whiff rate on pitches low and away in the zone, 43%. His whiff rate on pitches high and away, 36%. His whiff rate on pitches just high and down the middle, 43%. So like
Just the
it's
swings have not been competitive. He looks overmatched.
Yeah, so I also, thinking of the Sosa addition, like I wonder if that, plays into like giving Okamoto a little bit more of a breather sometimes, right? Like we obviously saw him out of the lineup the other day, and just kind of what, maybe a little bit more of a breather so that he can kind of, catch his breath a little bit. Because I would imagine it's been quite a whirlwind for him in his, first taste of major league action to go from this guy who comes out of the gates super hot and kind of looks like the best version of himself. And since then it's been a lot of struggles. It's been pitchers hitting him in the exact same spot every single time. And I even think of there was the one pitch this weekend where he got like a curveball right down the middle, and it was his swing was like kind of feeble and late, and it looked like a defensive swing, and it was an 0-0 pitch. And Joe Siddall says he looks like a guy who's thinking up there. Right. So I wonder, if you try and go out and you get a guy like Lenyn Sosa who can kind of fill in and, give him a breather every once in a while and just kind of let him catch his breath as he tries to figure out the major league lifestyle and kind of continue to work on being able to counteract what pitchers are doing to him.
Yeah, because to this point, it just hasn't been the case. And again, it's early. Everything you say this episode is prefaced with it's early, but you got to see something out of him.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Another thing that has been going on away from the Major League Diamonds is that the minor league season is now in full swing, and obviously we do love to chat a little bit of minor leagues here, and tough not to be excited by JoJo Parker's kind of resurgence after the slow start. Obviously, he has the 4 RBI game the other day, hitting balls 100 plus like almost every single time he's up there, walking a ton. He's sprung for extra bases a couple times. How excited are you by JoJo Parker kind of seemingly get his feet on the ground in pro ball?
It's a big development for sure. I mean, again, we heard prior to the season, I mean, Connor Griffin comps because just the nature of him in terms of if the helium, if everything clicked, he could be a huge riser. And again, we haven't seen a ton of him, but the early returns are really nice. I mean, those that use Prospect Savant, if you do yourself a favor, there will be a nice dopamine hit looking at his page. There are lots of red. He's looked the part of a top prospect. Now, I mean, Zach, this will be more your domain than mine, but to you, what has been most impressive?
I mean, again, like we've talked about this on this show, like at numerous occasions, where like I think either you and I could drop into low A and walk like 5 or 6% of the time probably. But I think the strike zone control has been really impressive. He's riding a 6 game hit streak as we sit here today. And in that time he has a 21.9% walk rate, a 12.5% strikeout rate. Like just the ability to put the bat on the ball and control the strike zone. I mean, obviously, if you want to talk about like some Blue Jays tendencies, some Blue Jays attributes that he has. Those have both shown through really early, and of course, on this hit streak, like he's been hitting the ball super hard, like not necessarily in the air a bunch, but you look at like the average exit velo, it's really nice. You look at kind of the 90th percentile exit velocity, and it's looking like a guy who should be kind of primed for a breakout here. As much as you can kind of break out as the eighth overall pick in your in your first pro season.
Yeah, but this is a guy that very clearly looks like he's got an up arrow next to his name when, the May or June prospect rankings come out. Like this is a guy that by the end of the year could certainly be a top 25 prospect in baseball if he's going to continue to do that. And I mean, who knows beyond that if he can really put something together where he could end up at the end of the year.
Yeah, some other guys, I mean, too, that of course, wanted to mention is, of course, Blaine Bullard, who we had on the show last year after the draft, last year's 12th round pick, got the highest signing bonus ever for a 12th rounder from the Blue Jays, and he hit his first couple career homers. The speed plays, like just watching him, hit a ground ball, it's entertaining the way that he runs things out. I think he's a guy who's certainly worth monitoring, and you kind of think of, I've seen like Doug Fox tweet, it's not hard to imagine like a Blue Jays future where your 1-2 tandem is Blaine Bullard and JoJo Parker, kind of similar to the way that they're running out in Dunedin right now. I talked about Yorman Lecourt kind of in our season preview episode, or maybe it was a different episode that we talked about him, but I think he's put 3 balls in play and all 3 of them have been home runs, so it's been a good start for him as a potential switch hitter, a guy with power. Carter Cunningham, coming off a Northwest League Player of the Week award winning. He's got a 187 WRC plus so far, 3 homers, like a ton of RBIs. Certainly some guys to be excited about in kind of the first full week of full season ball that we saw.
Jojo Parker, obviously the kind of story of call it the early season. Anybody else that to you is really like the story to follow right now? Good or
Yeah,
bad, even.
yeah, no, I think obviously, it's hard not to look at the minors and not talk about Arjun Amala. And, it's been an interesting start for him where, the strikeout rate is kind of around where it was last year. Like the walk rate is good. The BABIP has been tough once again, where it's like a 235 BABIP. So he's only hitting 192, but he's getting on base a fairly decent amount. So, that's a guy that you really want to see come out of the gates hot, considering the way that his season ended last year. And, you kind of want him in repeating a level, right? Like when you repeat a level, you want to like be able to kind of hit the ground running because you've been there before, you've done that, so you should be able to adjust to that level of talent. Obviously, he's still super young, so he'll be a guy that we'll be monitoring for sure. I think one thing to me that's like also going to be important as we sit here, talking about this Blue Jays rotation is kind of the guys in the high minors, right? And how they pitch and who's able to kind of stand out early on. CJ Van Eyck and Chad Dallas have both been really good so far. Chad Dallas has a .7 ERA, or sorry, a .87 ERA. CJ Van Eyck has a 3.21. The results have been really good for both of them. You'd like to see the strikeouts climb a little bit higher for sure, but has been encouraging there. Adam Macko has been off to a strong start. Danny Thompson Jr. We talked about him before we hit record. Kind of, I learned that his nickname is Flat Brim because he doesn't bend his brim. So maybe not the most creative nickname there, but he hasn't given up a run yet this year. So certainly, a high number of guys that I think are intriguing and have kind of come out to strong starts here.
Going to be really interesting, I think, with this Blue Jays farm system because the year they had last year obviously was like such an enormous breakout, basically throughout the whole system. Like, basically, was the catalyst for them having a huge trade deadline in a lot of respects. And this year, it could be crucial if they have aspirations of big things, not just on the trade front, but like the guys knocking on the door because of all the injuries we've seen. You're gonna need contributors from the minors to come up and be productive. And there's guys that have kind of demonstrated that. I mean, it's also been some tough starts from, the likes of Gage Stanifer or, as you mentioned, RJ Schreck. Like, those are the kind of guys that they're going to need to continue the success that they had in 2025 and then carry that on to 2026.
We already saw them trade from their farm system. Jordan Rich lands them Lenyn Sosa. That'll be an interesting name to follow, I guess, with being a high school outfielder that they took so low that kind of has like the Blaine Bullard speed. But we'll kind of wait and see how it turns out there. I guess that kind of does it for us here. I mean, I kind of wonder for you as we look forward to this series, which is starting up fairly shortly here. Jacob Mizorowski against Kevin Gausman. Beyond that, of course, the Diamondback series. A nice little 9-game road trip for the Jays. What are you going to specifically be watching for? Addition to kind of all the stuff that we talked about so far.
Yeah, I mean, it's really the offense. It really is. The bats got to get going, and it's tough because all of the injuries. But, in spite of that, this is a team that still has the likes of Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Kazuma Okamoto, still early, still lots of reason to believe he's got some juice in his bat. The likes of Dalton Varsho, if he can heat up. Jesus Sanchez, if he's going to heat up. Like, there's still enough contributors kicking around for these Blue Jays that they've got to get the bats going. And if they can, especially in this Brewers series, that you're going to get Kevin Gausman, you're going to get Dylan Cease, to me, reason to believe it's a winnable series despite the formidable opponent.
Yeah, and the Brewers are coming in off a sweep of the Nationals, and they're missing certainly a fair share of players. I believe Yelich and Chiriot, and some others are out there. So definitely a winnable series, especially when you got Gosman and Cease going. I think always fun to watch those two guys go, especially the way that they've started the year.
Yeah, the Kevin Gosman start of the season. Cy Young watch. Is it too early? I
But
mean,
after
probably, but that's a guy that's dealing right now.
Kevin Gosman versus Cam Schlittler for the AL Cy Young, as we all predicted entering the season.
Just as we all said. Tarek Skubal who?
All right. Well, we are going to run. Make sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening along on the audio provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review. You can follow all of us on Twitter. I am at Worden_Zach. Jori is at Jori Negin-Shecter. And the pod is at BED_pod. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the games this week.